Good morning. Good morning. I'm the Reverend Lisa Bovey-Kemper, interim minister here at the Unitarian Universalist community of Charlotte. My pronouns are she, her. In this community, challenged by our liberating faith, we discover deeper spiritual meaning, nurture loving community, cultivate courageous connections, and partner in the work of justice. Welcome to each and every one of you, whether you are joining on the live stream or in person. We're pleased to have guests and newcomers with us in the room and online. I encourage you to reach out to our Director of Member Relations, Kelly Green. Her email is on the screen, as is her photograph, so you can recognize her. We have large print orders of service, personal hearing assistance devices, and an elevator available. There's also a hearing loop in our alternate worship space, the Bernstein Room. We have coloring pages and fidgets for all ages in the vestibule, if that is useful to you or your children. I have a couple of announcements. There are two save the date messages. The first one is, and they're for around the same time, but we would like you to save the date for two really important, cool things that are happening. One is the candidating week for your new minister candidate, which is not known or announced yet. The search team is still in their stealth mode while they are interviewing folks. But April 28th through May 5th is that candidating week. We are inviting all of you, asking all of you, who, particularly those of you who are members and have a vote, to attend as many events as possible in that week. The vote to call the candidate will be on the 5th. So just so you know, that's what's coming up. Mark your calendar. The hour by hour schedule will come out, I'm sure, much closer to the date, but for now, save that date. The second save the date is actually the same weekend. On the Saturday, the 27th, Charlotte, UUCC, has been invited to participate, and we have agreed to host an event that is happening all across the southern region. It's called Beyond the Binary, and it is about supporting trans and non-binary folks in states that are not welcoming. And it's a real honor for us to have been selected to be one of the live in-person gathering spaces. It is a model that was invented by the Syracuse congregation, and they did it last year, and they wanted to bring it to the southern region. So this is a collaboration between southern region staff, the Syracuse congregation, Side with Love, and a whole bunch of other UU organizations. There will be a keynote speaker yet to be announced, a worship service in the morning. It's a really great opportunity, and we will be inviting the folks from the congregations nearby who would like to participate in person. The whole thing will be live streamed, but if people like in Greensboro and wherever close by want to come in and join us in person, we can do that. So those are the two save the date announcements for you today. Whether you are here in person or joining via live stream, whether today is your first or your 1000th Sunday among us, we are stronger because you are here. We are one people of many beliefs, origins, identities, and genders. We are all growing, all learning, all loved. It is good to be together. And now I invite you to take a deep breath and settle in as our service begins. Our call to worship this morning is from Parable of the Sower by Octavia Butler. The child in each of us knows paradise. Paradise is home. Home as it was, or home as it should have been. Paradise is one's own place, one's own people, one's own world. Knowing and known, perhaps even loving and loved. Yet every child is cast from paradise into growth and new community, into vast and ongoing change. This morning, let us celebrate the ways that we hold each other known and knowing in this space. Let us worship together. I invite you to rise in body or spirit and join in singing hymn number 40 in the gray hymnal. The morning hangs a signal. The words will be on the screen.
Morning. There is an endless net of threads throughout the universe. At every crossing of the threads, there is an individual, and every individual is a crystal bead. At every crystal bead reflects not only the light from every other crystal in the net, but also every reflection throughout the entire universe. I light the chalice this morning for the miracle of our interdependence.
Ever since the beginning of time, people have created stories to help explain things. This is one of those stories. One day, near the beginning of the time of people on the earth, the source of all creation was kind of sad. You see, just a little while before, the source of all creation had created a most magnificent thing: human beings. The humans seemed okay, but something was missing. In a flash, the source of all creation realized what was missing, took a deep breath, and let it out again, all over the world. This created a kind of gentle breeze over all the earth. And as the humans breathed in, a special something entered their bodies with the air and became part of them. This special something is called many things by many different people. But once it had entered the human world, things began to change. The human beings began to have ideas about things. They began to invent things. They began to think of stories. They began to laugh. They began to cry. Meaning had entered the world. But the thing that made the source of all creation the most happy was that human beings began to imagine their creator. And as the source of all creation watched, a cosmic crystal began to form, just the right size and shape to hold the story of where everything came from. But it wasn't long until before the humans imagined their creator and in more and more ways. And the crystal grew and grew to have room for them all. And with each new idea, the creator's own identity changed. Some humans imagined the creator to be like a mother, and the source of all creation was like a mother. Some humans imagined that the creator was scientific principles, and the source of all creation was scientific principles. Some humans imagined that there was no creator, and the source of all creation did not exist. Some humans imagined the creator to be human, and the source of all creation was human. As the crystal grew and grew, an ever-expanding neighborhood with a home for each new idea, the source of all creation was happy and joyful, and maybe even more than anything, proud of the human beings who were so creative and so talented. But as the source of all creation watched, the crystal began to tremble. Deep down inside, it shook, and cracks began to spread through it. It shook and it shook and it shook, and suddenly it burst apart, small shards going everywhere. The source of all creation began gathering them all up, peering into each piece. The source of all saw that in each broken piece of the crystal was a different way of understanding the creator. Inside one piece was one idea, and inside another piece was another idea. As the source of all creation gathered, it became clear that the ideas had rubbed so hard against each other that they couldn't hold together any longer. That was why the crystal had shattered. Looking out over all the many pieces, the source of all creation noticed how they glittered so beautifully now that they all had facets of their own. Large and small, many-sided and simple, each piece had its own character. Along their jagged edges and uninhibited by the present pressure of existing as one solid piece, some were still growing and finding their own special shapes. Yes, this was right. This was good. But it had been so wonderful to witness all those ideas coexisting like neighbors, the source of all creation wondered if there was any way to bring the pieces together again without forcing them into one small space, allowing the glory of each unique crystal to shine. After thinking for a long time, the source of all creation realized what to do. Source of all creation made an idea and took that idea and stretched it out again and again like taffy, making it long and thin and flexible. Like a tiny golden thread, the source of all creation took this golden thread and made one end of it into a sharp point that could pierce the crystal. Then the source of all took each unique broken piece of crystal and threaded the golden strand through each center. One, then another, until every piece of crystal was linked by this golden thread. In the end, the source of all creation had made a beautiful beaded necklace. A necklace that held every piece of the crystal together again, and they shone like all the stars in the sky. That is why, even though the religions of the world have beautiful and meaningful differences, each one has its own way of talking about this golden thread. Like every other piece of crystal, Unitarian Universalism has running through its center the same miraculous idea. May we always remember our core values and use them to bless the world. I am Phoenix,
the firebird,
Phoenix everlasting. I am Phoenix, immortal, eternal. I live in Arabia. I'm as large as an eagle. My feathers are scarlet, purple, golden.
There is but one Phoenix.
There have never been more. I am my own mother, granddaughter, great-granddaughter. I was
my own midwife,
will be my gravedigger. For each time I discover I'm becoming old, I gather up twigs of sweet-smelling spices and build a nest on the top of a palm.
I climb inside.
Then I wait for noon.
And when the sun's hot as fire,
I flap my wings till the twigs beneath me burst into flames,
which I fan
with my wings
and fan till the fire
and I
are no more.
Eight days pass, the ashes cool.
Then on the 9th day,
in the morning,
at dawn,
just as the sun
rises in the east,
I rise from the ashes and fly upward.
A new Phoenix.
My own mother,
daughter,
grandmother, great-grandmother, and on until the end of time. You can rise if you wish and sing hymn number 51. It's a funny thing to live with children. There are so many things that I just know. I don't know how I know it. I didn't realize I had to learn it. But then I have to figure out how to explain it to someone else who's learning. A number of years ago, we spent a lot of time explaining the difference between real, mythical, and extinct. Right? A dragon is mythical, which means that it's imaginary. It did or does not exist in real life. A dinosaur, however, is extinct, which means that it used to exist, it was real, but there aren't any left. Saber-toothed tigers and woolly mammoths, which are they? Extinct. Mermaids and basilisks? Mythical. Narwhals? Real and not extinct. Am I the only one that used to think that narwhals were mythical? I really did. They're not. Many of the characters in myths are also deities or superhuman beings. The crossover in fantasy and science fiction and myth and legend is squishy at best. In this morning's story, we heard that some humans imagined the creator to be like a mother, and the source of all creation was like a mother. Some humans imagined the creator to be scientific principles, and the source of all creation was scientific principles. Some humans imagined there was no creator, and the source of all creation did not exist. Some humans imagine the creator to be human, and the source of all creation was human. This is a different way to think about gods or superhuman beings than most of us were taught, I suspect. In Christianity and other monotheistic religions, a god is defined as the creator and ruler of the universe and source of all moral authority, the supreme being. In certain other religions, a superhuman being or spirit is worshipped as having power over nature or human fortunes. A myth is a traditional story, especially one concerning the early history of a people or explaining some natural or social phenomenon, and typically involving supernatural beings or events. This word is also used, of course, to refer to a widely held but false belief or idea. I think we are drawn to the fantastical creatures of myth and legend because they allow us to imagine other worlds, to imagine what is possible, and to put metaphorical brackets around phenomena that we don't know how to explain. Even though we know so much because of science and physics and microscopes and satellites and all of those things, there are still plenty of phenomena that we don't know how to explain. You can see in the dystopian literature and in the tradition of Afrofuturism, which I'm gonna have to preach a whole other sermon about. But you can see in those constructs, those, I don't know what the word is, you can see in them ways that people in more contemporary times have imagined what it would look like in the future, imagining a myth or a legend of the future when we are looking at, you know, the Cold War. What happens if that fear of nuclear war came to pass or comes to pass? What happens after? Imagining what that would look like is a way of making meaning, making those metaphorical brackets. Afrofuturism is building narratives in which blackness is celebrated, not feared or dismissed or killed. What would it look like as a people oppressed to not be oppressed? Those are narratives imagining a future. It's kind of squishy and complicated, this myth and legend and future imagining. Of the mythical beings, dragons are quite popular among the elementary school set, though I think actually dragons are loved by people of all ages. I know I enjoy them. Sometimes I imagine riding a dragon while it flies. If I can't have my own wings, if I can't be a raptor, as I have always wished to be, it seems like riding a dragon would be the next best thing. Dragons are definitely awesome, but the mythical creature that I've always been most drawn to, that poem, that Phoenix poem that we read, the poem for two voices, is from a book that I was given as a gift when I was 12-ish. And that was my first experience with the Phoenix story, and I have loved it ever since. You can see on this stole the phoenix at the bottom of the tree of life. Also, my beloved, now no longer with us, dog Maya, who got me and half of my class through seminary, barking up the tree of life as the people who knew her knew that she would have no qualms about doing such a thing. So the beauty and the power of the phoenix has figured prominently in my own personal symbology. A majestic creature experiencing literal physical transformation. And it turns out, and I've done a lot of research, the phoenix is the only resurrection narrative that I could find that does not involve one being perpetrating an act of violence on another to create the conditions in which resurrection happens. There was something so powerful to me when I read this poem for the first time as an adult. Not only is the phoenix in this telling a female character, which I identified with, she builds the fire under herself. There's no external force that pushes her into death and resurrection. She builds the fire under herself. There was something so powerful about a creature like me who had such agency to transform herself. And what does it mean to choose transformation? Learning to choose self-actualization, vulnerability, and the authenticity that comes with that was and is a huge part of my spiritual journey. So I wonder, what are the mythical creatures, the narratives of legend, the fantasy people and creatures that hold meaning and inspire you? Have you ever thought about the images that exist in your own personal symbology? Of course, Jesus is, for many people, one of those symbols. And I once heard a question asked of a group of Christians: would it make a difference to your beliefs or values if the historical existence of Jesus was proven beyond a shadow of a doubt? Does it matter if we know whether a symbolic figure like Jesus was real or mythical? And I've heard a number of Christians answer that question, and most of them all have a different answer, as you wouldn't be surprised to hear. But it is a powerful question. Some people don't want to know if Jesus is historically real. Some people say it wouldn't make a difference. Some people haven't thought about it. But the question could be asked of any deity or myth. Does it matter if it can be proven to be real, or if it can be proven to be not real? Neil Gaiman, in his book American Gods, says, I can believe things that are true and things that aren't true, and I can believe things where nobody knows if they are true or not. Belief is not the same as truth, and real is not the same as factual. Is your brain getting a little tangled up with all of this back and forth about myth and truth and fact and belief? It's okay, mine is too. So I invite you to hold these ideas of real and myth and factual and truth and symbols and metaphorical making meaning. Hold them loosely and see where they take you. What gifts of understanding and perspective have you found in mythical tales and archetypal images? What creatures and ideas make up your own personal symbology? If you've been in my office, you know that I have an old printer's drawer up on its side on one of my shelves, and it is full of superheroes and figurines of people and characters that are touchstones for me about making meaning. The kids like to play with them a lot, but I'll tell you a secret right here. They are not just for kids to play with, so if you want to stop by sometime and check it out, you're welcome. Identifying with archetypes and symbols is a basic human practice. We want to feel like we are not alone, like others have experienced the same things we are experiencing. It calls to mind Carl Jung's understanding of the collective unconscious. He believed that archetypes are universal and that they can help us make meaning of our experiences. But even that is limited by a Western European, largely white, straight frame, right? Which is why we look to other voices and other narratives, as well as those that come from our own traditions. What happens when we find ourselves trying to fit into the constraints of what I call modern myths? Modern myths are expectations of norms, often stereotypes or ideals, which become widely held but false beliefs or ideas. In this time of ongoing pandemic and conflict and political upheaval, I am seeing more and more and more of these modern myths out there, and I see them harming all of us. Let me give you an example relevant to this congregation at this time, perhaps, of a modern myth. It's a funny little ditty I found on the internet about the perfect minister. It appears to have originated sometime in the early 80s and has been added to but not updated for inflation or gender norms. Here goes. The perfect pastor preaches exactly 10 minutes. He condemns sin roundly but never hurts anyone's feelings. He works from 8 a.m. until midnight and is also the church janitor. The perfect pastor makes $40 a week, wears good clothes, drives a good car, buys good books, and donates $30 a week to the church. He is 29 years old and has 40 years of experience. The perfect pastor eats nutritiously, gets his rest, exercises daily, and is always there to listen to you night or day. The perfect pastor has a burning desire to work with teenagers, and he spends most of his time with the senior citizens. He makes 15 home visits a day and is always in his office when needed. The perfect pastor always has time for church council and all of its committees. Like I said, he makes 15 daily calls to church families, visits shut-ins and the hospitalized, evangelizes the unchurched, and is always available. He also knows when someone is sick and needs visitation without anyone telling him about it. He spends all day each Saturday preparing the Sunday sermon, and he focuses on his family too. Some of the versions of this end with a sort of chain letter saying, if you don't like your pastor, package him up and mail him to the first church on the list of the addresses below. Within 6 weeks, you will have received multiple pastors in the mail. Surely one of them will measure up. It's a good laugh, of course. But we all know, I hope we all know, that the perfect pastor is also a myth. So too is the parent who manages to avoid all the mistakes their parents made, and the person who used all of their COVID isolation time to write the next great American novel or perfect their meditation practice. This is where myths can be harmful. They can encourage holding on to others' beliefs about who you should be, external expectations that don't match how you want to be. And if we only focus on the past, if we use these stories to look back to what was and try to get back there, we're focusing in the wrong direction. This is especially true as you look toward welcoming your candidate for settled minister. Rather than comparing them to past ministers, including me, consider the work you have ahead of you as a community. There's no perfect minister. Remember, there is only the perfect minister for this community at this time. During the height of the COVID pandemic, Reverend Hannah Roberts Villeneuve said, "No matter how lonely or impossible a given moment feels, none of us is alone in it. If you don't believe in God, there is still something bigger than you that is always with you. Millions of people around the world are with you. Generations upon generations of humankind who have endured unspeakable hardship and still found joy and hope in the midst of it are all with you. We are in this together. For good or ill, what any one person does impacts all of us. We are in it together." We are not all in isolation anymore, but there are still gut-wrenching and terrifying things happening around us, both nearby and far away. Sometimes I can't catch my breath because there are so many to hold. These are the moments we must pull together and support one another. In these difficult times, dig into myths and archetypes and let them inspire and comfort you. Imagine new stories that will help you find strength and inspiration as you move into an unknown future. Let the story take you to a place you couldn't go in real life. Invite belief in impossible things. Who remembers Alice in Wonderland? Alice laughed. "There's no use in trying," she said. "One can't believe impossible things." "I dare say you haven't had much practice," said the Queen. "When I was younger, I always did it for half an hour a day. Why, sometimes I've believed as many as 6 impossible things before breakfast." But don't let those impossible things be expectations that tell you that you are not enough. We're living through deeply, deeply challenging times. Self-forgiveness is an essential practice, so be gentle with yourself. Remember that the golden thread that connects all religions, that necklace of crystal, Indra's net, that golden thread applies to you too. If you are lonely, if you are overwhelmed, if you are exhausted, or if you are feeling energized and ready to help others, gather your people and support one another. Start where you are and do what you can. May it be so.
That's a hard act to follow. All right, let me type in my giant long passcode. Hey everyone. I'm Tana. Hey. I hope that you've enjoyed the service thus far, and I invite you to reflect with me about the nature of storytelling. Like everyone here, I have heard a story or two before. Heck, I've even made up my own stories. Yeah, making up stories, as well as hearing them, might as well be as old as time, which is crazy to think about. Why have stories as an art persisted throughout our entire history? Well, you see, ultimately, stories are teaching tools and ways to remember the things that we know. Myths, folktales, and even modern works help to color our understanding of our surroundings, values, relationships, and selves, both on a conscious level and a subconscious level. This is why when my mother asked me the other night, "Do you have a myth or legend that speaks to you?" I told her, no. I don't have a myth. I have every single story that has been told to me floating around in my brain. Whether I remember it clearly or not, doesn't matter. Without each of these stories, I would not be who I am today, and humanity would not be what it is if we had stopped telling stories a long time ago. For example, think of a myth or legend that you know. Not one you relate to, just that you know. Who told it to you? Why did they tell it to you? How do you think it has affected you? Did you feel more of a connection to the person who told it to you? Really dig deep for a minute, and you might just find something really interesting. It could be as simple as the story teaching you new vocabulary, or as deep as you understanding something new about the person who told it to you. Now, imagine that you hadn't heard any stories at all. None. Who would you be? Would you feel a connection to those around you? How hard would it be for you to learn something new or to understand the nuance of something? I bet when faced with these thoughts, it would seem quite impossible to live fruitfully without stories. We should be grateful that we have them and how they connect us to all of humankind's past, as well as be mindful when we hear them. What are the intentions of this story? What can we learn from them besides the obvious? Asking questions like this help us to be intentional about our interactions and help illuminate the insights that stories have for us. Well, in any case, I've kind of started to ramble. I really can talk about this all day long, but we don't have the time for that. So if y'all want to hit me up after the service, I've got so much more, as my mother would know. But I really encourage you to continue to think about stories, myths, legends, fables, etc., and what we can learn from them. Thank you. And now it's time for the offering. We are grateful to our members who pledge their generous financial support and who make regular contributions so that we can continue doing what we do, i.e. sitting around together, talking, hanging out, and having generally a pretty good time. While the offering is collected, you are invited to come forward and light a candle honoring a milestone, concern, or a celebration. Let's get it started.
I invite you to breathe deeply, to be present to the spirit of life that is in us and through us and around us, that golden thread, those human connections that give us strength when we struggle and celebrate when we are joyful. The gathered community hears and holds both difficulty and ease as we honor the experiences that make each of us who we are. This morning, I light our candle of memory and hope, which we light for births and deaths and other milestones in the congregation, in honor of the life of longtime UUCC member Becky Whittington, who died on Wednesday. We also are sending our love to Becky's son, Austin Klein, who is a member of this congregation. We also send healing thoughts to Cindy Busher as she heals from hip replacement surgery. And our love is with Brenny and Tristan Thompson as they grieve the loss of Brenny's brother, Sidner Thompson III. I recently learned a colleague in ministry. As we move into a time of meditation, I want to tell you about another myth. One of those myths that has congealed a little bit in my soul about what a minister is expected to know and do. I realized this morning, actually it was a couple days ago, I realized that I feel like there is an expectation that I, as a minister, should always know what to say. Even when it is hard, even all the time. Because what has been on my heart this last, for the couple of months, is all of the terrible things that are happening across the world. I often don't speak at length about what's happening in Gaza, what's still happening in the Ukraine, constant violence against Black and brown bodies, constant violence against trans and non-binary and otherwise queer bodies. Friends, I don't know what to say when I hear about the death of Alexei Navalny and his exhortation, if they kill me, it means that we're making a difference, paraphrased. The constant horror that is in the West Bank. Intractable, generational conflict. And when I saw the news about Bex Benedict, I remembered when I was younger. I remembered Matthew Shepard and how we said never again. And here we are. I don't know what to say. But I do know that we have more power than we think. I do know that the connections and the love and the support and the welcoming space that is this community, I know that those things are real and I know that they matter. So I invite you into a slightly longer time of silence than we usually do for our meditation. Just to know that it's hard, that we don't know what is in each of our hearts about all of these things and more, and that the only way we will get through any of it is together. I invite you into the silence. Friends, there is an endless net of threads throughout the universe. At every crossing of the threads, there is an individual, and every individual is a crystal bead. And every crystal bead reflects not only the light from every other crystal, but also every other reflection through the entire universe. Amen, and blessed be. I invite you to rise in body or spirit and join in singing hymn number 148, Let Freedom Span Both East and West. To join in speaking the words on the screen, which we say when extinguishing our chalice. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.